and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I have here another inks comparison video, and this is my favourite Shimmer inks comparison number 1. So I think with that, let's go and swab up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the description, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the colour of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me. When I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over, I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here and I will rinse the nib off several times and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. So the first ink I have here is a Cult Pens exclusive, and this is called Whiskey Gold, and it's made by Vinta. So we'll do an ink swatch here, and I'm just going to try and get a bit more. There you go. You can see that this is going to be a lovely shimmering ink. It's a very nice gold colour, and it's one that has actually become quite a favourite of mine. So we'll do a second pass over the top half, and that's just to show the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib. So this is Vinta, and it's Whiskey Gold. But that is quite a nice gold coloured ink there. The next ink here is a Dominant Industry limited edition ink, and it is called Autumn Sunlight, and it again is a Cult Pens exclusive, and you can see the sheer amount of shimmer in that bottle. So I'm going to have to shake this up a little bit just to disperse some of that particle. So we'll do an ink swatch here. Now this is quite a lighter colour ink, so you do really need to use this in a broad or a very, very wet nib. We'll do a second pass over the top half just to show the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is a Dominant Industry. And it is called Autumn Sunlight. But as you can see, it's actually not too bad on a writing sample. But when you do that ink swatch, it is a little bit on the light side. So you will need a wet or a broad nib to be using that ink with. The next ink here, again, is another Dominant Industries, and it's a Cult Pens exclusive, and it's simply called Dusk. But again, you can see there is a lot of shimmer in that bottle. So I'm going to shake that up a little bit and see if we can disperse that shimmer. So we'll do an ink swatch. And you can see that this is, even though it's still a pale colour, it's still a lot darker than the previous ink. We'll do a second pass over the top half. Just show the difference between a wet or a broad, or a dry or a narrow writing nib. And this is Dominant Industry. And it's simply called Dusk. And I think actually that's a really good name for that colour of ink. The next ink here is again another Dominant Industry, but it is called Harvest Moon, and again a Cult Pens exclusive. But you can see the amount of shimmer in that bottle there. So again, I'll shake this up and see if I can disperse that ink, or that shimmer into the ink. So we'll do an ink swatch here. Now this is a very, very light ink. So you do have to be careful on what paper you're using this on, and also what nib you're going to use it on, because it is very, very pale. We'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet or broad, or dry or a narrow writing nib. But you can see there already, it is quite a pale ink. So you just have to be very mindful when using this ink, which pens you're going to use it in, and preferably a very wet or broad nib. So this is a Dominant Industry, and it is Harvest Moon. And you can see that the writing sample there is a lot darker than the ink swatch, thankfully, because it does make it a little bit more legible, but still you have to be very mindful what type of pen you're going to be using this with. The next ink here is a Diamine Frosted Orchid, and again you can see that there is shimmer here in that bottle, and I'm just going to shake it up to try and disperse that shimmer again. So we'll do an ink swatch, and this is a kind of more darker colour that I prefer, although sometimes depending on the season, I gravitate towards lighter, more orangey or yellowy colour inks. So we'll do a second pass over the top half, and you're going to see the difference between a wet or broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib there. And this is Diamine Shimmertastic. I'm just, yeah, I can probably get Tastic in there as well. And this is called Frosted Orchid. But that, for me, is a very nice colour. I really do like it, and it's an ink that I don't use as often as I should do. But whenever I break open that bottle, I do like the look of it. And then the last ink here is a Jacques Herbin, and it's a Riviere de la Lune. And again, you'll see some shimmer in this bottle here. So I'm going to try and shake that up. So we'll do an ink swatch here. Now this is more of a blue colour, but you can see, as that's going on, you can see the shimmer particles, hopefully there on camera, where you're seeing spots of on that ink, and that is a shimmer. So we'll do a second pass over the top half, and you can see the difference between a wet or broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib there. And this is Jacques Herbin, and it's Riviere de la Lune. But that is quite an interesting blue ink there. Almost, I would say, as it goes on there, if you look at the dryish area, it's a little bit more like a blue-black ink. So I think let's now take a look at these inks now they have dried. So the first ink here is Vinta Whiskey Gold, and I'd have to say this is my all-time favourite shimmer ink. It is a really nice gold ink. It flows really well in the pens that I've put it in. It has a lot of shimmer on. Now, can you see the difference between a wet or a broad or a dry or a narrow writing nib? Definitely you can. Is there shading going on? Yes, there is some shading in pulled areas. Is there sheen? It's trying to sheen around the edges. You can see the darker elements, but you're not really seeing much more sheen than that. But is there shimmer? Yes, you've got a lot of gold shimmer there. Look at that shimmer. So that is a very nice shimmering ink, and even the writing sample there looks really nice. The next ink here is a Dominant Industry, and it's called Autumn Sunlight. And can you see the difference between a wet or broad or dry or narrow writing nib? You definitely can. Quite a difference there. Are you seeing any shading? There is some shading in the pulled areas, and I'll bring this up close so you can see that there. Is there any sheen? Not really. Is there shimmer? Yes, there is, but it's a subtle shimmer. But you can see on that writing sample, it will shimmer more. So it is actually, if you want a lighter yellow gold shimmer colored ink, then I would say that Dominant Industry Autumn Sunlight is probably the one to go for. The next one here is Dominant Industry Dusk, and can you see the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib? You definitely can. Is there shading going on? There's a little bit in the pulled area, but like with most of these shimmer inks, the shimmer will mask the shading there. Is there any sheen? Maybe a little bit around the edge, but nothing really that you can see. And then obviously, is there any shimmer there? You do have shimmer, and it's just trying to get that on camera there that you'll see that there's quite a bit of shimmer there. It's quite a nice. I don't see much shimmer in the writing sample though, so it's not as in your face as some of the other shimmer inks. The next one here is Dominant Industry Harvest Moon, and I did say that this is a really light ink. I think if you've got some very pale coloured, maybe ivory or coffee coloured, brown sepia coloured pens like sailor pens, this could be a good ink match for that pen. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib? Yes, you definitely can. Is there shading? There's definitely shading in that pulled area. Is there any sheen? No, we're not seeing any sheen there, but you will see some shimmer there, and more so in the writing sample. That's really where you're going to see it. It's a very subtle shimmer, but you will see it there. So if you want a light coloured ink, then maybe check that one out. And then the next one here is Diamine Shimmertastic Frosted Orchid. And this is quite an insane one in terms of writing sample, and I'll show you that in a minute. Can you see the difference between a wet or broad or dry or a narrow writing nib? Yes, definitely you can. Can you see any shading going on? There's bits of shading, but again, it's masked by a lot of this shimmer. Is there any sheen? No, there isn't any sheen on this one. But here is the shimmer. So it's got a lot of shimmer there. And if you look at that writing sample, look at how that shimmers. So it's got a lot of shimmer particulate there. It's going to be very sparkly ink when you're writing with that on the page. And then the last ink here is a ink by Jacques Herbin, and it's called Riviere de la Lune. And this is an interesting one. It's a dark blue. It kind of went on a bit like a blue-black. Can you see any difference between the wet or broad or dry or narrow? You definitely can. Is there any pooling going on or shading? There is, but again, it's being blocked by the shimmer. There is no sheen, but you can see that there is a lot of shimmer there on that ink. And also in that writing sample, look at that, how that shimmers as well. So there you have it. That's my favourite Shimmer inks comparison #1 video. If there are any of these inks that you like, do let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other inks you'd like me to check out, do let me know in the comments below. So that's my favourite Shimmer inks comparison #1 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.